The world before the flood can be represented like this. We have a pristine world of beauty with a great sea, a great ocean, and seas fingering into the landmass. And that world was surrounded by a firmament canopy. That canopy of water was approximately 11 miles above the earth. Now, that firmament canopy of water did a wonderful thing. It filtered out the shortwave radiation from the sun and from stellar bodies. But the long wave and mid-spectral radiation would come right on in. That did something wonderful. The world before the flood had greater atmospheric pressure because of the gravitational weight of that firmament pushing in on the atmosphere. The world before the flood was protected from the harmful radiation. And that produced some very wonderful things. Essentially, everything in the fossil record was larger in the past than it is today. The great white shark today gets 36 feet long, but in the fossil record, he is 60 feet long. Something must explain that. In addition to that, this lepidodendron has its counterpart today. The very same form is the lycopsid club moss. It gets 16 inches tall at best. But in the fossil record, that very same plant is 150 feet tall. We're not evolving. We've lost something in the process, or lost the conditions that would permit the full expression of the life form. Did you get that? We are building a context at Glen Rose for the first time in history called the hyperbaric biosphere. And in that biosphere, we're going to be having 2.18 atmospheres of pressure. That's what the best of our research shows. That canopy, firmament, pushing in on the atmosphere would have introduced 2.18 atmospheres of pressure. We're going to introduce 25% oxygen, 0.25% CO2, carbon dioxide. That should make a world of difference, because that's what academically we find indicated in the fossil record. What will that do? Well, we have dragonflies today. Here in East Texas, the dragonflies get how big? About a 4-inch wingspan, maybe 5 inches. In the fossil record, that very same life form, the dragonfly, had a 36-inch wingspan. What explains that? The evolutionary concept cannot really explain that, because if the processes with increased energy, which I'll address in the next lecture, with increased complexity, is causing the forms to accelerate in complexity, they certainly should accelerate in dexterity and size. Well, that's not the case. We find they were bigger in the past. Human life forms were larger in the past, and incidentally, they were more intelligent in the past. But given these circumstances, with a little over 2 atmospheres of pressure, 25% oxygen in contrast to today's 21% oxygen, the brain, from conception on, would be hyperoxygenated. Not to the point of toxicity. This is the perfect level, a little over 2 atmospheres of pressure, 25% oxygen. In the fetal formation of the brain, it would be enlarged to begin with. The cellular structure would be fed and nurtured from before the child was born. Then you would live in a context where your brain would be totally fed in all its capacity with oxygen. That means that every person sitting in this audience, if you were to live under these conditions and having been born under those conditions, would put Albert Einstein to shame in your intellectual capacity. You have that capacity. Why don't you use it? Well, we really can't. to our fullest capacity. But if our brains, if the blood plasma were hyperoxygenated today, that would solve a lot of problems. Oh, that does solve a lot of problems, including the dinosaurs. You see, with their small lung capacity, the hemoglobin cell can only take 4 oxygen molecules. Did you know that? The hemoglobin in the blood is saturated with 4 oxygen molecules. That's all it can take. And you can't get enough oxygen to the deep cell tissue of such bulk size. But Texas A&M University has found that under 2 atmospheres of pressure with slightly enriched oxygen, all the blood plasma becomes saturated with oxygen. That means that overnight, an open wound heals. Today it takes 14 days for that open wound to heal. But overnight, under those hyperoxygenated contexts, an open wound heals.